Brand new allegations are swirling as the NBA player and coach scandal continues to grow, implicating more and more NBA players, NFL players, and even boxers. Some of the new names we're seeing potentially implicated in this include NBA Hall of Famer Kevin Garnett, NBA coach of the Los Angeles Clippers Ty Lue, and NFL Hall of Famer tight end Antonio Gates. We'll jump into each and every one of those and what we know so far, and evidence is also mounting against Chauncey Billups as more information comes forward. We'll break down exactly how Billups got involved in this ordeal and how he's planning on handling things moving forward. We'll also discuss exactly what drives athletes to get involved in something like this. But before any of that, I first want to address this $7 million figure used in these federal indictments. Based solely on my personal connection to victims in this story, I have reason to believe the amount lost is north of $50 million. I mean, I personally know of 8 figures worth of damages here off just my own network. Imagine how many other people there are that have not come forward, that are not in the poker world, that I'm not privy to. I cannot see a scenario where this scam was less than 25, 30 million, but it certainly might even reach $100 million lost as we see more and more accusations and victims come forward. It also makes sense if you think about it. You got $7 million in this indictment and 34 people. So each person would make roughly $200,000 if they all chopped it equally. But this happened over years. So people were working 50 or 60K a year jobs, scamming people in high stakes poker games. That seems extremely unlikely to me. And it's far, far more likely that many additional millions were lost. Let's kick things off by talking about NBA head coach Chauncey Billups. Now, Chauncey Billups has recently made a big move on the legal defense team, hiring the same defense attorney that worked for both Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. Billups going down a familiar road. You'd think he'd want to blaze a new trail. That attorney in question is Mark Mukasey. According to this article from Yahoo Sports, Mukasey specializes in white-collar defense and has represented many high-profile clients, including Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, who was acquitted of murder in 2019, Trump's real estate company, and his charity. Funny enough, this is not the only case Mukasey is working in the NBA. He is also hired by Joe Sandberg, the co-founder of Aspiration, which is the company involved with the Kawhi Leonard allegations that they were paying him money through a shell corporation to increase his salary with the Los Angeles Clippers. That's impressive. I smell an early candidate for NBA Defensive Player of the Year. But back to Chauncey Billups. Exactly how did he get involved in this scheme? Well, according to ESPN, in this case, prosecutors allege the intermediary was Robert L. Stroud, a 67-year-old Louisville man with a criminal history. In 1994, Stroud killed a man during an evening playing cards and gambling at a home in Louisville, according to a local outlet, Wave News. Can you imagine playing in a game where people kill each other over a poker hand? That's certainly not a game I'd want to play in, even though it does sound like there's dead money. The outlet also reported that when Stroud was pulled over in 2001 for having expired tags, a police officer found, quote, sports betting cards, dice, playing cards, and what appeared to be gambling records in the back seat. Stroud recruited Billups and Jones to take part in rigged poker games run by members of New York City's most prominent crime families, according to an indictment and accompanying court documents made public last week. Quote, Stroud recruited former professional athletes, including defendants Billups and Damon Jones, into the conspiracy to lure wealthy victims into playing in the games, according to a detention memo filed with the case. Quote, for their role as face cards and members of the cheating teams, Stroud paid them a portion of the criminal proceeds. Okay, so this article breaks down exactly what happened to get Chauncey Billups involved with this. Except one thing, exactly what happened. Why would you ever get involved with somebody that got convicted of killing someone? Also, and look, you might call me old-fashioned, but when you kill somebody, how about not letting that person out again? Just a thought. Isn't this the exact kind of person you would expect to be cheating in poker games? I mean, if anything, this is improvement. So why exactly does this happen? Well, this ESPN article went on to talk a bit more about that. It's hard to figure out why this happened, says Keith Corbett, a lawyer and former head of the federal organization Crime Strike Force in Detroit. He said that in past cases, many gamblers have become ensnared with the mob because they are addicted to the action. There is always a certain lure where people want to do something that's a little shady so they can get some cash and not report it. Or they might owe these guys money for some reason, maybe because they bet with them. You can kind of see how this might play out. You have athletes that want to gamble on things but know they probably shouldn't. They don't want to go through traditional methods where they might get caught either because they're gambling on something that they shouldn't or because they don't want people to know they're gambling, and they turn to the underground world of bookies that's rife with crime. According to Scott Bernstein, a Mafia expert, he said that underworld figures often begin cultivating relationships with athletes early at youth sports events and other loosely regulated venues. Those events can be sometimes staged by criminals. They can then later tap into those relationships. Often the ask is not one that would necessarily affect the outcome of a game. If a player is asked to get under a certain number of rebounds or play fewer minutes by faking an injury, it can be easy to rationalize. They can do mental gymnastics to the point where they don't really think they are affecting the outcome of a game, so they are morally in the clear in their own minds. It's always good to be morally clear in your own mind, especially for Canadians now, as they can play on my favorite website using my name. Another source whose name I can't pronounce said, "What people don't understand about some athletes is that gambling is an extension of their competitive spirit. They want to raise the stakes. These guys go on a plane on a road trip and lose thousands of dollars." Wow, not tens of dollars, not hundreds of dollars, but thousands of dollars. At least that's how Kash Patel would probably put it. I guess the competitive angle makes some sense to me. You're used to competing at a really high level with a lot of money on the line for contracts and championships and things like that. But I do feel like it's much more likely that people end up making these connections earlier on in their life, or they end up in a bad place where they owe someone money because they've been making bets that are foolish and losing against underground bookies. One last note on this article, and I love this. It says, in a September 2023 text message copied in court papers, Damon Jones asked Stroud, the man prosecutors alleged recruited him and Billups into the poker scheme, for an advance before a game. Quote, "I don't know how much the job pays tomorrow, but can I get a 10K advance on it? God really blessed me that you have action for me because I needed it today bad." Rigged poker games truly are a blessing. Moving on to some fascinating develops here on this case. So it's very clear that a lot of different people are going to end up being involved in this in some capacity. We knew this going in because a lot of people in the poker world have played with various athletes and celebrities and knew some of these games were cheated. And now we're starting to see those dominoes fall with many of these names coming forward. One of the most connected people in the entire poker world is Hustler Casino Live's founder, Ryan Feldman. Feldman runs the show and organizes the games at HCL, which sometimes includes some of the biggest influencers in the world and some large athletes and other stars. When this story first broke, Feldman tweeted saying, "I heard about these rigged private games a few years ago in Vegas and Miami, run by some bad actors from New York. Don't be surprised if a certain NBA Hall of Famer and a certain boxer get arrested too. I forgot, an NFL Hall of Famer too. An NBA Hall of Famer, an NFL Hall of Famer, and a boxer. I guess that boxer sucks." A poll was tweeted underneath saying, "Who will the boxer be? Ryan Garcia, Mike Tyson, or Eubanks?" To which Feldman said none of them. It's now looking like we know who the NBA Hall of Famer is, with Pablo Torre tweeting, "Update, a number of former pro athletes played at private poker games organized by those indicted by the DOJ in, quote, Operation Royal Flush." You know those guys were having a good time when they came up with that code name. And they were like, yeah, and if Operation Royal Flush is successful, we're going to have ourselves a full house. I can confirm to you there's some back channels here that Kevin Garnett did play in at least one or two of these poker games. And in fact, I've heard his name thrown around quite a bit, which has led to this next tweet from Pablo Torre saying, "A source close to Kevin Garnett tells Pablo finds out that Garnett initially thought he was going to an after party, not a poker game, and that he chose to leave the 2019 poker game, which was in LA, early." Per source, Garnett has not been contacted by federal authorities. Again, we do not know anything specific about Kevin Garnett at this point, so these are merely speculation. However, we do know that he was at least somewhat involved in these games and did make an appearance. But Pablo Torre wasn't done dropping bombs on Twitter, also mentioning Antonio Gates as the NFL Hall of Famer potentially implicated in this scheme. Torre tweeted out saying, "Pro Football Hall of Famer and former Chargers tight end Antonio Gates hosted and played in an allegedly rigged Miami poker game. Sources with direct knowledge tell Pablo finds out. That was organized by Curtis Meeks. Meeks was indicted by the federal government on Thursday." We briefly covered Curtis Meeks in the last video, but he was a former boxer with a long history of criminal charges, who also appears to be implicated in a lot of these different rigged poker game scandals. To be clear, these are allegations against Antonio Gates and these are charges against Meeks, but no one has been convicted of anything so far. But you have to imagine if Pablo Torre is tweeting this, he's probably got some pretty good sources that indicate these games happened and may have been rigged. According to this article from the New York Post, Antonio Gates participated and hosted an allegedly rigged poker game organized by Curtis Meeks. Details were limited, but Torrey's report follows a report by The Post on Saturday, where one purported victim said that he and his friends had been scammed out of nearly $1 million, with an ex-NFL player serving as the face card for a game in which Meeks was the main participant. If that allegation is true, Antonio Gates might be losing with those charges. The big question on everyone's mind now is which boxer might be implicated in this scandal if it's not any of these three previously mentioned. We'll certainly stay tuned as more updates happen on that front. But we have one more person whose name's recently surfaced we have to discuss. I'm talking about Ty Lue, the head coach of the Los Angeles Clippers. According to Pablo Torre, once again, Clippers head coach Tyronn Lue was also in attendance at the allegedly rigged April 2019 poker game in Las Vegas. But sources say Lue did not play at the same table as his good friend, Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups. This story also made its way to the New York Post. Apparently, Ty Lue and Chauncey Billups are close. The man Lue recently called his best friend and also the man whom Lue would hire as a Clippers assistant himself the very next year, 2020, once Lue got his current head job. Ooh, it's not a good look to be around somebody who's indicted for federal charges, possibly even at the game which some of this took place, and then also right afterwards, 1 year later, you hire them as an assistant coach. If this is totally unrelated, this is pretty unfortunate for Ty Lue, but it's certainly going to raise some follow-up questions for people when they see that happen. The article went on to say that Ty Lue stuck up for Chauncey Billups, saying, "I know who he is as a person. I've been with him since I was 17 years old." Ty Lue's love for poker is well known in the community, but he also has close ties to Damon Jones, who was implicated in this scheme after allegedly tipping off gamblers that LeBron James would not play in a February 9th, 2023 game against the Milwaukee Bucks. Damon Jones truly is a man of God, which reminds me of this Bible verse, "Remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth." It's all right there in the Bible, guys. The New York Post goes on to say an open secret around the NBA is that Ty Lue, who lives in Vegas during the offseason, also loves poker and is often seen at what is considered the nexus of the NBA poker world, the Aria High Limit Bar, often alongside other retired NBA players whom Lue has separately hired to his coaching staff in Cleveland and who has called Lue his best friend Damon Jones. I did not know Ty Lue had an intense passion for poker, and if he wants to improve his game, he should check out Lucid Poker for free on November 10th. The article goes on to say, in June of 2024, both Ty Lue and Damon Jones sat next to each other on the rail, the poker equivalent of courtside at a playoff game, to watch another friend of theirs compete at the World Series of Poker, as seen on the broadcast of that event. Most of these athletes and coaches named have one big issue. They don't have actual victims there to corroborate the evidence publicly. And it makes sense. I've talked to a number of people who have been in all these games around the country, and a lot of them say the exact same thing to me. Well, I can tell you what happened, or I can tell you what I know, or I can tell you what happened to me, but I'm not going to come forward and say it publicly. I mean, some of these guys are involved with mafia hitmen. You know, why would you risk yourself, your own safety, your family's safety, just to be a source that comes forward and outs these criminals? You almost can't. We're talking about tens of millions, if not over $100 million stolen from people in all of these games around the country happening for years. But if you come forward and you're one of the whistleblowers that really brings truth and justice to the world, you might make the top of the hit list for someone that doesn't want to see that information continuing to spread. Because of this, you're going to see lots of stories break where it's kind of anonymous or you don't know exactly who it was. And that's probably a good thing. And while I know it sucks if you like some of these all-stars and Hall of Famers and whatnot to see their name thrown out there as possibly criminally involved, but I can tell you one thing. Oftentimes where there's smoke, there's fire. And when it comes to rigged poker games in America, we got ourselves a lot of fire. Only in extreme cases will people want to come forward, like what happened in a recent podcast to a player named Dazzo, who was cheated out of probably almost $1 million playing in these LA private games, and maybe was the first domino that started this whole investigation. I'll put a link below if you want to check that out too. But he only came forward most likely because he had so much money stolen from him and was still owed. For most people, it's a pure negative free roll for them to say anything at all. So they don't. They stay quiet, which is why this has been going on for year after year after year and victim after victim after victim. It's time for this to finally move forward, and hopefully the federal government can do something to end these criminals' reign of terror. We don't know exactly who's all guilty or innocent yet, but I can say where there's smoke, oftentimes there's fire. And it does look like this one's trails ablaze. It was a Trailblazers joke because Chauncey Billups, he's the head coach for Portland. Portland has an NBA team. You guys get it. I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe, guys, for more updates on this continuing story.